So everything's set up now. We've got both heads on. Snare wires are properly tensioned in the middle. And now it's time to tune the drum. But should we see what it sounds like, what we've done so far?
Yeah, so we haven't referenced it throughout tuning. We've got it mechanically tensioned without checking any of the lug points, and I'll take you through what that means. But yeah, let's hit it. So in my head, when I hit the drum for the first time, I want to be looking for things that I like and that I don't like. What are your thoughts on this one, Myles?
I like the body. The body had a nice crack. And I like the fact that when you did the lighter touches, the snare wires were still activating.
Yeah.
They weren't, you didn't have nothing and then something as your velocity grew. You still had that, the articulation.
Yeah. How about the bits that you don't like?
There was resonance.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a resonance in there.
And, you know, resonance can be a good or a bad thing dependent on the type of music you're playing. So, you know, you might want a really resonant sound if you're playing reggae. You know, to that point, you might even want to throw a clear head on your drum to get that real resonant sound. But with the CALFTONE drum heads, it's this bonded material that gives you that thicker, warmer sound. So if there is a little bit more resonance, that tells me that maybe the drum just needs a little bit of tweaking on a few tension rod points, just to make sure that the drum is equalized and the drum head is kind of in tune with itself. Obviously, if you've got part of the drum head that's really tight over here and part of the drum head that's loose over here, you're going to get conflicting frequencies, and that's usually where these funny overtones come from. The first point, once we've hit the drum, we kind of figure out, right, are the wires around about where they are? Great. Are they reacting and responding? As you said, there was quite a good amount of sensitivity at all velocities. So we know that the likelihood is that one of these tension rods or a couple of the tension rods are just a little bit out of tune with each other. So what we want to do is go around the drum and reference each of the tension rod points. Now, the easiest way to do this is to release the wires from the snare. And if you really want to get in depth with the tuning, you can throw a cloth underneath the wires. I tend to not put a drumstick underneath the wires because that can stretch the wires out, it can flatten the coils.
That is the usual go-to.
A lot of people will just throw a stick. If you're careful, it's okay, but a cloth is much friendlier to snare coils than a drumstick
I suppose it helps dampen the resonant head as well.
It does as well, because what we're looking to do is really isolate this top head. So as soon as I've taken the wires off, we've got a much clearer sound. We haven't got that white noise that the wires produce. And it just dampens that underside, so we're not going to get any frequencies from the snare side head. From there, what I'll do, I'll just pop the key over here, and we want to mute the center of the drum. So I'm not pushing my fingers into the drum head. I'm just muting the center of the drum, and I'm going to tap around about an inch from each lug point here. Now, hopefully, you can hear the difference in that. Move that one out of the way. So here I've kind of identified two tension rods that are slightly higher tuned than the other, or the majority of the other tension rods. So, in fact, there's two pairs. So higher, lower, lower, higher, higher, lower, lower. So the opposite lug to that higher one should be slightly higher as well. So we can pick one or two things. We can either go with that higher frequency and we can tune these guys up, or we can detune these. Now, I prefer to tune up to a note rather than detune, and there's a number of reasons for that. But if we detune the higher tension rods, there's potential for the film to get stuck on the bearing edge of the shell.
Okay.
So you can detune that and it will keep the tension. As soon as you hit it the first time, the tension will fall out of the film.
Okay.
So it's always better to tune up. And again, if you're detuning a drum, what you need to do is detune and then tune back up to the note that you want it at. So you kind of detune it beyond where you want to go and then tune back into it.
back up.
And that just means that the film is allowed to settle back onto the bearing edge without any creeping. And
So it finds its own natural position on the bearing edge.
Exactly. So kind of always tune up to the note. So in this respect, we'll use this as the reference note. We know those two are equal. We know that's slightly lower.
In those lower ones as well, you hear some dissonance as well. These two seem to sing with the drum better.
Exactly. So when we hit this drum as a whole right now, you're getting that frequency and that frequency, which is creating this weird meandering, resonance. And that's what's given us that kind of unappetizing to our ears. That's giving you that unappetizing sort of resonance. But for somebody, that might be the perfect snare sound.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying this is a terrible snare sound.
But there are no wrong answers.
Exactly.
It's just wrong answers to your ears.
So let's... So I'm going to pick these two to tension up. Now at this point, we know we've got some tension in the drum. So I'm going to take this up around about a 1/6 or an 1/8 of a turn. Not that much. That 1/6 or an 1/8 of a turn has brought it into tune with that one. Now let's go back to the other two tension rods that were slightly out of tune. Bringing this one up has brought these up slightly, but they're still a little bit low. So this time we're just going to employ a very small amount of tension on those two tension rods. Slightly lower still, not by much.
Small increments are
Very
the
small
key.
increments. So when we fitted the heads, we were using half increments. When we get to the fine tuning, an 1/8 of a turn will make a huge difference. A 1/4 of a turn will take you from low to high tension. So it's making sure you don't miss those spots halfway through. Turning a key, because that could be like your perfect sound, then you've completely missed it because you've put too much tension on the rods. So that one's still a little bit low.
I suppose as well, once you get to these higher tensions, those small turns really make the difference between something sharp or flat.
Exactly. And again, make sure we don't push into the drum, because you can change the tension just by pushing into it. Okay, so I'm just going to put another little turn on that. Just drop that key down there. Take the cloth out the bottom and put the wires back on, and let's see where we're at.
The honkiness has gone.
Yeah, so there's still a little bit of overtone. And the wires are maybe a little bit more buzzy because we've put more tension in this. So what I might do is just adjust those wires a little bit more. Great, so we've now started to equalize the sound of the drum. And at this point, you might think, right, I like the note of the drum, but I want it to be a little bit more airy. Just by backing the wires off, you can hear the drum starting to breathe.
Yeah.
So the rim shots become more pronounced because, again, we're not choking that shell up. So for me, I'd probably put a little bit more tension in it, and all of a sudden we've got a drum that's really expressive.
Yeah.
It's very sensitive, but it's got a great rim shot.
And there's a note to it as well, and the sustain of the drum matches the sustain of the wires.
Yeah, and that note isn't kind of deviating too much. Again, we can go through the drum. And we can really fine tune, and you can spend a long, long time doing this. But again, just by tweaking, re-listening, you can really dial in your sound very quickly. So now we're getting rid of that extra bit of overtone.
Just those tiny tones.
Yeah, so really the importance of doing this in a quiet room rather than your practice room while your guitarist's wailing away, it really takes the pressure off, but it means you can really dial in your tone.
Yep.
So when you come to stick it on the kit and everybody plays, your kit's sounding great. Yep. So again, that's kind of mid to mid-high tuning, which I really like for that drum.
Yeah, you still get the rim shot as well. The body still comes through.
This is it. This is it. So it's got the fatness. It's got kind of that vintagey tone, obviously utilising the CALFTONE head. That's exactly the sound we're looking for. But the key with this tuning setup, obviously the tuning's taking no time at all, and that's because the initial setup of the drum, we've made sure that each of the heads is equally tensioned. We've made sure that we haven't overly tightened the wires. We've just been very mindful and very methodical in how we set the heads up. So let's take a dive into a slightly higher tension. A quarter turn, an eighth of a turn will make a huge difference as to where the drum sits sonically. So we've got that kind of fat lower fi sound. What we want to do is adjust each of these tension rods by the same mechanical amount. So let's do a quarter turn and let's repeat that right across the drum. So we're not doing any mad techniques where we're detuning one tension rod or any of that. I'm just literally working around the drum, doing the same amount of mechanical turns.
You can still hear that cracking coming through. That means you're doing something right.
That's it.
That's much fuller.
Yeah, much fuller. Obviously, it's a slightly different sound. You're probably going to, incorporate that into maybe a funk setup. But no crazy overtones from that. What we can do is we can play with the wires. And you can hear when you go past the point of kind of the drum resonating and you take the wires a little bit further, that'll give you a really snappy response. It almost self-dampens the drum head. So we haven't put any damping on this as of yet. But
sounds great.
There is a time and a place for damping. Obviously, we're in a pretty nice studio here. Yeah. You might be in a really resonant room, that's super bright. Stone floor, usually a wedding venue.
The long reverbs.
Yeah, exactly. So if you did want to kind of control that sound, in fact, let's take it up another notch. Let's take it into the higher territory. Now, generally, if you were going to be wanting a real high poppy sound, this probably isn't the right drum shell or drum head for you. So it's kind of picking the right equipment for the job. And again, some drummers do fall foul of that.
Yep.
But our heads are pretty versatile, and with a little bit of thought, you can get some of the more kind of extreme tensions, even in a more vintage style of head and drum. So let's put another quarter turn on it. This is what everybody should be doing as well, is exploring these different tensions. It might sound great, it might sound terrible, but you've got to try these things out.
I know with my drum, it's I have certain spots on the head where if I want the fats, you obviously go for the middle. But if I'm doing Wheatus Teenage Dirtbag, those verse snares are really resonant, and I hit in this lower third here, but that's all because of a setup that I've sort of explored to try and get two tones from one snare.
From one drum. That's exactly it. If you're really confident with this stuff, you can, change the tension at a gig, at a show, but it's usually out of most people's comfort zone. But again, the more you do this, the more confident it'll become. So we've put another quarter turn. So we should be in the real kind of funk, hip hop, sort of more modern sound. So again, we've put a lot more tension in. Now that head has got a lot more surface tension in it, so it's resonating a little bit more. So at that point, we might want to employ one of our EQ pods. So as a reminder, you get two of these in a little sachet in the Snare TuneUp kit. And we're just going to remove one of those. And I will usually pop it in between the two tension rods here.
Not too far away from the rim.
Exactly. So around about an inch. And this is just an experiment to see where we're at. So now it's totally killed it. And this is the problem with if you dive in with damping gels straight away, before equalizing the drum, you'll just end up with a really flat, one-dimensional drum. Serves a purpose, obviously, if you need a really controlled sound. It's a case of sticking the gel on and you can totally dampen it. But for me, we lose a little bit of character by going full on in the center. So if you set your gel a little bit further back towards the edge, it makes the damping less aggressive. Still quite aggressive, or you can kind of stick it here.
It's like a smaller wallet.
Exactly. So we're getting different shell tones. Just placement of the gel is critical as well. So for my ears, I'm not going to use the gel. I prefer this. But I preferred the tension one step back. So what we can do, we can take this back by a quarter turn, and like I said, just tune back up into the head, just to make sure we don't get that film snagging on the bearing edge. Remember where we've been, remember where we're going to. I think this one.
You can hear it adjusting back and settling down onto the shell.
That's exactly it. There we go. Cool, so let's see where we're at. Great, so we're back to that mid-high tension, which I prefer compared to the higher tension. But let's throw the gel on this one. And again, I'm not going to put the gel all the way on the drum head, because you can see how effective that is. Let's just turn it. So we just got a little bit of resonance. So damping devices can really help. They can also hinder your sound. So use them sparingly is probably the best word when using gels. But really try and equalize the head before diving into any damping.
I suppose they're additions to the snare, aren't they, really? If the snare's not set up correctly in the first place, it'll be like shoveling sand out of one pit and then creating another one.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, for those who aren't interested in tuning, using a tone gel, any sort of damping device is a very quick fix, but I would always encourage people to figure out tuning. And once you've got that basic thing down, you can explore low, high, medium tuning without the need for damping. The damping is kind of the cherry on the top to tuning. And it's one of those products that you can throw on the drum when needed, but lots of money is spent on these drums. You know, there's a lot of time developing the shells. There's a lot of time developing our heads as well. And they should work in harmony without the need of too many external devices. I think usually damping's used when people can't figure out why the drum's not doing what they want it to. So tuning basics, I think it really comes down to the initial setup. So that time we took to change the heads, check the shell, make sure the wires are straight, making sure that mechanically we've tensioned that head as best we can. When it comes to the tuning part, this is kind of the quick bit. And the most, it gives the most gratification when you get to that point and you're like, drum sounds brilliant. And if you don't have to put a damping device on the drum, happy days. Yeah, it's one less thing to remember.
Yeah, exactly. So Ben's come in today and shown us how to use the Evers TuneUp kit to upgrade your snare drum and find your sound easily. I know I've found it extremely useful, and I've got 2 snares at home that are just waiting to be dissected and diagnosed with their problems. Thank you very much for coming to
No
see us.
worries, man. No worries.
If you found this video useful and you can see yourself using these tips on your snare drum, then please like and subscribe to the Gift Music Drums YouTube channel. I've been Myles, and this has been Ben from Evans. Thank you for watching.